Skipping your buddy check is one of the easiest ways to invite a preventable problem. I'm Don, and my goal is to keep you calm, in control, and ready for real-world failures. In this video, we'll run through BWRAF, a lovely acronym, and other similar buddy check mnemonics used to help build systems for catching issues before they become issues as pre-dive partner or group-based safety checks. Let's build some consistent habits and make every dive smoother and safer. Picture this. You drop to 10 meters or 33 feet, kick to adjust, and you find your dangling octo wedges itself in a rock and rips clean off, causing a free flow. That miss started on the surface and stole your focus underwater and caused an early dive to abort for several divers. It's not an emergency, everything's fine because you're with buddies, but it was a preventable accident. And not even experienced divers are immune to this. With more dives under our belts, routine starts to feel like proof of safety. We assemble our kit by feel, we chat on the boat, we ask a quick good to go, and then we splash. Nothing went wrong in the last 20 dives, so the mind can assume nothing will go wrong on the next one. But that assumption is exactly how small misses creep in. Overconfidence in habit replaces intentional verification, and we shave seconds in the name of efficiency. A missed inflator function shows up as a nasty sticky button that holds down much longer than you want it to, causing a more agonizing dive and something you might have to abort from. A tank valve that is not fully open breathes fine on the surface but starves at depth when demand increases. An octo that was loose instantly breaks free as soon as you hit the water. A bungee or strap that is loose and dangling could become an entanglement hazard while diving. All these things are not that rare, and they do not care how many dives you have logged. I have watched smart divers make one tiny skip and pay for it with a blown plan or an early turn. The fix is not to become paranoid, it is to become consistent. It starts with consistency of your own pre-dive safety checks, and it ends with a redundant group or buddy check. A buddy check is not a formality. It is a short shared ritual that catches the tiny things before they matter. It also makes you a diving team because you are building confidence in each other, not just your own gear. And it's worth noting that familiarity with a buddy can create that hidden risk too. We assume we know their kit, but they borrowed the ABCD or moved their cutting tool or changed where the alternate is clipped. If you need to help them underwater, your hands will go to the wrong place unless you verified it topside. Social momentum and conditions can also push divers to skip safety checks. The group is moving to a dive site, the guide is counting down, and nobody wants to be a person to slow the train. That is where a short, predictable checklist shines. When your check has a fixed order and language, you can run it quickly and clearly without feeling awkward. So to start, we're going to define our pre-dive safety check by using 3 layers that fit together. First, a planning rundown for the team conversation so the dive has shared experiences and expectations. Second, a structured gear check so hardware works exactly as intended. And lastly, once you start to dive, you do a quick bubble check of everyone and make sure that everything is streamlined and looks where it should be as a last check before you dive down deeper. And usually this can be done just below the surface, just right at the surface, like no more than 5 feet or 1.5 meters. Each layer is simple and short. It builds on top of each other and makes sure that the dive goes smoothly. Together, they close the gaps that complacency opens. Confidence is great and vigilance is better. And by the way, all 3 of these layers can be done and ideally are done in the water if conditions allow. But at least step 3 is done in the water. So let's go into the details of the system that keeps you vigilant without slowing you down. So the basics is going to come down to those 3 3-layer system. I want you to remember those 3 layers because you'll find that most pre-dive safety checks follow those 3 layers in slightly different ways. And instead of introducing my own system here, I thought this video could go ahead and focus on the many existing systems because you're probably using one of them that you've been taught from open water diving or have experimented with from other agencies. And so I just want to introduce a bunch of them. So when you're working with other teams or other buddies, you'll be familiar with them, at least to some degree, and you'll be able to pick one that suits your needs. There is no single right checklist. The goal is to cover the same critical items every time in a clear and repeatable order. But by in this video, do pick one system that you like and use it consistently. When you start calling things out, say items out loud together so your buddy can see and confirm each check. Let's start with the PADI acronym, BWRAF. It's the most common option and you may already use it. And it works because it's short and covers the essentials without fuss. B is for BCD and buoyancy. During this part, you want to inflate fully. Press each dump valve and make sure the dump valves are tight. Confirm the inflator hose is seated, and if you dive dry suit, confirm your suit inflator and exhaust function are working. And of course, make sure the exhaust is working on your inflator valve as well. W is for weights. Confirm the type and amount. Make sure you don't go underweighted or overweighted. If you're using ditchable weights, call them out so your buddy knows where they are and how to ditch them. And tug those integrated pockets to make sure they don't accidentally eject on you during the dive. And if you are wearing a weight belt, make sure your weight belt is ready for a right hand release. You always want to be able to grab with your right hand, grab the loose strap and pull to your right so that you can release the belt easily in an emergency. R is for releases. Run hands from valve to waist. Tighten the cam bands. Flatten shoulder and chest straps. And free any hose or toggle caught under the webbing. It's also a good time to make sure your octo is routed correctly and where it needs to be and is obviously not dangling. It's gonna basically be there and ready to splash. Double check any open pockets, open zippers, loose straps. Make sure nothing is dangling and free. A is for air. Make sure your valve is open. You can breathe from your regulator while watching your SPG, and you should see when you're breathing in, the SPG is not dropping dramatically. It should hold pressure while you're breathing in. If you see a dramatic drop, you might check your valve is all the way open. And if you don't see it returning at all, it's definitely not open and you need to open the valve. Make sure you also breathe from your octo as well to make sure that it's functioning fine. Ideally, breathe both of these in water with your face down into water. And make sure you breathe out as well to test the exhaust. It's also a good time to share with everyone how much gas you have and your gas mixture like nitrox, and double checking your dive computer and that everything is set correctly, because it's not too uncommon that people forget to change the mixture on their dive computer, so it's not calculating right. This is a great time to double check all that. And then F is for final check. Do a slow head to toe scan and confirm each other before you move. It's also important if you have a long hose to go ahead and deploy your long hose, show everyone that it's not tangled anywhere, and then stow it again. So that's BWRAF. Another family of checklists uses ABCDEFG, which is easy to remember and simple to call out together at the surface. A is for air in the same fashion, but you do this up front. Of course, also checking your dive computers as well. Best to breathe from your regulators in water and make sure you breathe out and make sure your gas is on. Then B is for buoyancy. Very similar to BWRAF in your BCD and your buoyancy check. Make sure you test the inflate and deflate and check all your dump valves. And then C is for computer and clips. Confirm your computer is on, has the right gas mix, everything is clipped where it needs to be, especially your SPG. It's not dangling, it's clipped or in your cummerbund and properly where it should be. And D is for dive plan. This differs a little bit from BWRAF because I think BWRAF assumes that you've talked about your dive plan before BWRAF. But if you're doing the ABCD, you can say D, okay, now we're going to talk about the dive plan. Confirm direction, depth, duration, potential dangers or hazards, what to do if you have a lost dive buddy, and the turn pressure for the group. And this ensures that this discussion happens and everyone shares the same expectations and experience. And then we're to E, exposure and entry, which confirms thermal protection, gloves, and hood if needed. And ideally it's done in water so you make sure everything's sealing correctly and feels right. And you might also talk about the entry of where you're going to start to dive at this point as well. And then F is for final okay, a quick head-to-toe visual for snags, seals, or zips that are unzipped. And then G is an easy one and probably the most fun part, which is go. Everyone verbally confirms they're ready and ready to start to dive. And despite BWRAF and ABCDEFG not having the third part, which is checking to make sure no bubbles and that everything looks secure and crisp as soon as you start to dive, always add this in because it just takes literally like 15 seconds of your dive, or probably less. You just get underneath the water, check for bubbles. I am checking for bubbles and everything is okay. It's very easy to do and it saves a lot of pain at a deeper depth. Next, we'll have the aptly branded GUE Edge. But this one also does a good job at being very thorough. G is for goals. Say what you are here to do, what you want to see, and what will make you turn. U is for unified team. Agree who leads, who navigates, how you use space, and what hand signals you will use. E is for equipment. Confirm your configuration, donation protocol, hose routing, cutting tools, lights, and any new gear. And this is very similar to kind of BWRF. You're going to go through your gear checks at the same time, generally head to toe, right to left, or left to right, as long as you're consistent and you'll work through things as a group at the same time, usually calling things out like hood, mask, neck regulator, testing, in water, done. Then I'm going to take my long hose, testing, done. And you just kind of work things head to toe. And then also when you start going, you're either going to go right to left or left to right and call things out. And basically when you call things out, everyone's testing their own gear at the same time. And not everyone needs to say okay or anything. They just test. If there's an issue, someone says something. And if there's no issue, everyone's testing together. Quick and easy. And then there's E for exposure. And this is for aligning on maximum depth, target time, temperature, and anything that increases task loading. D is for decompression and ascent, defining the ascent rate, safety or deco stops, and contingencies if you plan no decompression. G is for gas, confirming the gas mix, start pressure, turn pressure, and the minimum reserve you will not breach. And then the final E is for environment. Note current, visibility, entanglement risks, entry and exit points, and potential boat traffic or any environmental hazards that you have to be aware of and should discuss before the dive begins. Next, we will look at SEBAM, which is a broader pre-splash rundown that many teams like because it bakes planning into the check like GUE Edge. S is for site survey. Confirm tides, current waves, wind, visibility, and other suitability at the dive site in that day. E is for emergencies. Review oxygen location, emergency contacts, and diver separation protocol. A is for activity. Align on a purpose of the dive and any special tasks or risks that the divers of the team need to be aware of or assigned. B is for buoyancy. Confirm the BCD, dry suit, and the buoyancy controls are working well, including the weight release and everyone's familiar with each other's setup. A is for air, although we should call it gas, but you want to confirm mixes, start and turn pressures, minimum reserve, and alternate locations if someone is out of air, where the alternate or octo is going to be. G is for gear and go. Confirm the cutting tools and spools, surface signaling, and that everything is secured before you move. Again, you could do this from top to bottom, right to left, left to right. It's generally called out as a buddy team or as individuals buddied off of each other, whichever works. I like to do it as a group because it's a little bit faster and a little bit more reliable. And of course, make sure you do it in water if you can. Then we'll move on to the next acronym, BRAID, B-R-A-I-D, which is a compact buddy-focused check that keeps instruments in the loop on purpose. So B is for buoyancy and weights. Confirm the inflation, venting, and weight dish method, similar to the other acronyms. R is for releases. Check that the weights are secure check every closure, and make sure nothing traps a hose or dump toggle. A is for air. Make sure your regulators are working, the gas is open fully, and that your SPG is not dropping when you're breathing, ideally in water. And make sure you exhaust in water as well. And then there's the I, which is instruments. This is where you confirm the SPG function and position. You check your computer is working, has battery, and is set to the right gas mixture, and that your compass is present if you're navigating. And then there is D for diver okay, a mutual visual and verbal confirmation that all divers are okay and ready to start to dive. You can run any of these on a deck or on ground at a shore, but it's ideal to do it on a calm surface and call out as a circle facing each other before you begin to dive, and that way you're checking your equipment in water as well. Ideally, also not deep water. And as mentioned, when you go through, make sure you speak the item, area, section of the check, perform the check, hear your buddies if anything is wrong, and make sure you operate the item to make sure it's functioning correctly. But we went over many different checklists here today. The sources for checklist variants and what their letters cover vary by agency, but you can see representative mappings for BWRAF and SEBAM in Dan's overview of checklists. Examples of ABC or ABCDE in SDI and instructor articles and BRAID used in contemporary buddy check guides. Whichever you like more, it's important that you get to know it and you practice it consistently. No checklist is going to be good if you don't do it the same way every time. If you obviously already have dive buddies, it would be fine to just use what they're doing already. These things are kind of cultural, and I won't say one is better than the other. Some cover more than others, but the big thing is to be consistent. But back to what I said earlier, you kind of want the 3 phases, the 3 layers for your pre-dive safety check. So I'm going to go over one way that you could just do without a mnemonic. It works in a similar fashion, but gives you kind of a baseline. But you'll see all the mnemonics basically trying to achieve the same thing, and that is that your planning and your gear is where it needs to be before you begin to dive. And so now all the mnemonics go into details of how you check your gear. So I'm going to give you a brief thing that you can do in a group or with a buddy anytime, just to quickly run through and do a quick pre-dive buddy check, especially when you're more comfortable with the system. It's a simple physical sweep you can run with any tune without a mnemonic. It covers most of the same gear checks as the acronyms, but it stays purely tactile and visual. It does not replace the gas planning or dive planning, which you generally do before this gear check. It only verifies buddy safety and equipment function. To start, you want to pick a direction. Top to bottom is normal, and then left to right or right to left. Pick one and never deviate. Consistency is what prevents misses when you are rushed, cold, or distracted. Make sure you face your buddy, or you can do it as a group facing inwards. Talk through each item, touch it, and operate it, so you both see and hear the check. Start at the head. Check that the hood is present and it's on, and the skirt is tucked in or where it needs to be. And check that the mask is under the hood if you're using a hood and perfectly seated against your face. And obviously nothing is dangling around the head. Then you move down and you can start with your primary regulator or your secondary regulator as long as you're consistent. Put it in water and take 3 slow breaths while watching the SPG for a steady needle to confirm the gas is on. It's good to point out if your primary is on a long hose or it's a standard configuration and what that might mean if you need to donate it to someone who is out of gas. Then you can talk about the alternate and test it in the same way as your primary. Talk about how you're going to donate gas if the other divers aren't familiar with your setup, and where to find the regulator that you're going to donate on your person. This is ideal, so your buddy might be able to grab the right one fast, but in a real emergency, maybe just grab whichever one that they can grab first. But it's always nice to point it out. Now work left to right, cross to upper body, or whichever have you. You can also do right to left, but for this example, I'll use left to right. So you're going to start with the left shoulder. It's a good time to check your dry suit exhaust valve and make sure it's on, it's open, and it's tight, if you have a dry suit. Then you work across to your inflator hose. You can go ahead and check that inflates and deflates, and that you can also inflate it manually. You can also double check that the quick connect is fully connected and seated. And then move to your left D-ring and clips and call off anything that is on that D-ring. And everyone else should be checking what's on their D-ring and making sure that's okay and that's where they want things as well. And that ideally nothing is dangling and no hoses are caught under the things that are on their D-ring. Then you check the center of your chest. Make sure everything's clipped and snug where it should be. If you're using a dry suit, it's also a good time to check that the inflation is working as expected. Also make sure that none of your hoses are trapped or where they shouldn't be. And then moving to the right D-ring, similar to the left D-ring, call out everything on your right D-ring and just make sure everything is where it should be and that you're comfortable with that setup. If you have any cameras or torches, it might be a good time to just double check the battery that they turn on and that they're functional at that time as well, if they're on that D-ring. And some like to do this later, but you can also do it now. But if you have a long hose attached there, you can take it off and just double check that it's free. You can show someone that it's free and untangled and then put it back on as well. You could do this later depending if you're using a mnemonic or your ritual. Just make sure you do it the same way every time. Still left to right. You can start with the arm. What is on your left arm? Like a compass. Then to your weight system, which might be on your torso. Making sure that it's where it needs to be, it's locked in place, and that the weights are there. You can confirm the type and amount and make sure that nothing's loose and is locked. And while you're on your left side of the torso, it's a good time to check your SPG, that it's routed correctly through your cummerbund or that it's clipped on the outside, but it is where it needs to be. It's easily visible and you can check it when you need to. Then you can move to the center waist to make sure that the buckles are where they need to be. If you're using a weight belt, nothing is over the weight belt. The weight belt should always be the last thing. Your cummerbund is snug and any straps is perfectly tied down snug. You want to secure, but not restrictive. And then we're on to that right weight system, which is going to be basically the same check as the left weight system. Make sure you call it out if you haven't already on how to ditch it in case anyone's unfamiliar with that system. Then on to the right arm, which ensure your computer is on and in the correct mode. It has the right nitrox mix set if applicable, and maybe if your compass is over there, call that out as well. And maybe you also have a backup dive computer. Wherever your dive computer is, you just want to call out what's on your right arm. Then you move down to your left and right pockets, going over their contents and finishing with the legs and of course that your fins are on. If something is off, stop and fix it without apology. The ocean does not reward rushing. And as mentioned earlier, I highly recommend you just do this as a group sweep with or without a mnemonic. Form that loose circle in the water, ideally. Appoint a caller who names each item in the same order and the whole group performs that check together. Everyone touches the item for presence and confirms it's working at the same time. Lastly, depending on your group preference, you can do a one-by-one long hose check to make sure it's free, and then also a bubble check before you start your dive. This is going into layer 3, but generally I prefer to start the dive just a little bit below the surface at 3 meters or 10 feet and just double check with everyone. Do the bubble check, look, everything's okay. And usually when you do this as a group, since everyone's descending at the same time, holding a nice depth, you can check really fast. Everyone can look around, everything's looking good, everyone's saying okay, the bubble check is done. It tends to happen really fast, and you can just make sure, double check for dangling or make sure that nothing feels off. Obviously, if someone forgot to somehow turn on their gas at this point, they'll find out really fast, and before anyone's like descending further, it'll be very obvious that we need to wait for that person or maybe even go back to the surface and figure that out. Also, if someone's having weight issues, you'll find it out fast before everyone's descending too deep too. So the third layer, just under the water at a shallow depth, works pretty well for this pre-dive safety check as well. And so the content matters more than the letters and the acronyms. The call and response makes the whole team stronger. Ultimately, you can use any checklist you like. Use the one your current social circles already use and experiment around and find the best one that works for you and your team. And I know I've said it many times, but the most important one is picking one and doing it consistently. And you'll be amazed at how many near misses it helps prevent in the long run. Small checks here and there prevent big problems down there. If you're interested in learning more about gas planning, I have a perfect video for you to watch next that ensures you can build a plan and communicate it with the rest of your team about gas strategy. Check it out here. Or if you want to find good ways to communicate with your dive buddy, check out this video here. The more you know, the more you'll love and protect the ocean. Until next time.